All righty, welcome back for another episode of Two Plane Sports. Today is Friday, September 30th, and we've got some stuff to talk about since we last put out an episode on Wednesday. Um, well, David Hicks is not a Sooner; he's an Aggie. He's committed to Texas A&M. We're going to talk a little bit of his commitment to A&M, the kind of the breakdown there, and really more focus on where does Oklahoma go for the defensive line, and why can't Oklahoma close this out against for big defensive linemen. A&M has been doing this to Oklahoma 3 times in a calendar year. It hurts. There's no sugarcoating that. And so we got a lot to say, a lot to talk about there. And we're going to be giving out our bets for the week also. And we're going to be going through seeing if Jose can continue his hot streak, and maybe if I can right the ship and get back on the winning side of things. And we'll see what we can do. But before we get into it, we just want to say we appreciate it. We're 5,100 plus subscribers. Hit the subscribe button if you're new here, or if you've been coming back here. It's easy and free. Turn the notification bell on so you know when we go live. Also, like the video. If you're already subscribed, when you like and then you comment throughout the video or stay for the end of the video challenge, it helps us out a whole lot. So hit that like button. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, Apple, and Spotify. Everything's linked in the description below. And OU plays TCU tomorrow, and you definitely need to be following us on Twitter and Instagram for that stuff. So, all right, we'll get into it now. Short intro. I know a lot of people are excited about that, not hearing me, ramble on for 5 minutes straight. So obviously, on Wednesday, David Hicks was set to announce his commitment at 3:30 Central Time. Obviously, he ended up choosing A&M. Jose, do you want to kind of highlight some of the big picture things? We don't have to go too into the weeds about his, the timeline, but what do you think? And we can talk, we can turn the page on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure at this point you guys have all heard the entire story. He was a commit ever since Party at the Palace, and stunned everyone on Wednesday. It really, who knows what happened? Everyone can speculate. But at the end of the day, he did not pick Oklahoma, which is unfortunate. And like you said, I think the bigger story here for Oklahoma is, why can't we close on these big time prospects at the defensive line position only? And I know people are going to be in the comment section probably saying, well, A&M is just paying their players to go to A&M. And maybe, but Oklahoma is paying money too. It's not like Oklahoma isn't giving these kids money. If we weren't, then I wouldn't expect most of these kids to commit to Oklahoma. Like that's college football now. You either embrace it or hate college football forever and never watch it again, or don't follow recruiting. But I think that they kind of have to prove it on the defensive line. Not that they haven't played well so far this year. They had one bad game, and again, people keep saying that one bad game is going to end recruiting for a school. That's just not how it works. Look at the top 10. I mean, Miami has a top 10 class. They absolutely stunk it up last week. You didn't see a whole bunch of decommitments. You didn't see a whole bunch of kids stop being interested in Miami. People still want to attend a school, be coached by individual coaches. I think at the end of the day, for Hicks alone, I think that proximity to his family was something that seemed really important to him. I mean, being really close to A&M, much closer than his parents and his younger siblings, much closer to A&M than they would be Oklahoma. He can visit them more often. So why he didn't end up going to one of the games at Oklahoma, I believe it was a Kent State game, if I remember correctly. He was supposed to go, and he ended up not going because he had conflict with one of his younger siblings' games or things that they were participating in. So clearly, family is very important, and they just won out by proximity. I think that's probably the biggest reason why. Now, Oklahoma does need to find a way to just close on one of these. I think David Stone is clearly the next biggest one in the 24 class. He's the I believe he's the number one or number two defensive lineman in the 24 class. It seems like he's going to be a Sooner. There's really been zero indication of him going elsewhere. From the beginning of his recruitment, it seems like Oklahoma's been the favorite regardless of the staff. They just need to close it out. I think that's going to start a domino effect here with defensive line. You'll see one guy do it, come in and join. And it's not like this defensive line group is bad. You have Derek LeBlanc, a fringe top 100 player who could break the top 100 by the end of his senior season. You have Colton Vasek, who's starting off hot his senior year and could crack into the top 100. You have PJ Adebawore, a five-star defensive end. It's not like they're not recruiting well. We just missed out on one guy, and yes, it's the biggest prize at the defensive line position. But you've got next year, and you've got a great group coming in, and it's not like it's over, right? I think I was telling you right before we started. I'm interested to see if the staff is going to continue to try to recruit him, or if they're just going to call it because he did say no to them, unlike Peyton Bowen. They're kind of taking their first swing as a staff at Peyton Bowen, and Peyton Bowen really hasn't said no to them quite yet, so that's why they're still pursuing a committed guy. Hicks, on the other hand, did say no, but will that really deter them? I think they should still at least keep trying, keep in contact with him. Maybe the check doesn't clear. Maybe maybe he has a change of heart. Who knows? But I think it's at least worth the staff's time to continue communication with Hicks until he signs that piece of paper that says he's going to A&M.
And, at the end of the day, yeah, OU didn't look great against Kansas State. Texas A&M lost to App State. So and he was there for that game too. He watched them lose against App State. And so obviously play on the field. Yeah. Overall, if you go 7-5, 6-6, yeah, that probably will deter someone. But if you have one bad game and, it's not going to be the make or break deal. So I don't think Kansas State, because of OU losing, is why he's committed to Texas A&M. Could it be, talking about the checks? I mean, it could be. I mean, we don't have truly any proof, so we can't say that for a fact. It's just, the illusion that it is, that Texas A&M, that's what they've been doing. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I'm not saying it one way or another. I do think it's interesting that he was silently committed to Oklahoma, one of the locks, and ended up, saying he was a Sooner all the way up until 20 minutes before his announcement, 30 minutes, or maybe even a few. But some reports are saying he's been decided on Texas A&M for a few days. So it's just, you never really know. And at the end of the day, this class is really good. I mean, yeah, did OU lose out on the crown jewel of the defensive line? Yeah, they did. So what? I mean, it is what it is. Life goes on. OU is still going to be a top 5 recruiting class at the end of this cycle. And for a first cycle going through, that they didn't have a full 2 years to do this cycle. And you're still going to end up top 5 and a really well-balanced all-around recruiting class. I mean, we would have killed for a class like this under the previous staff. We have to keep it all in perspective at the end of the day. And it's just time to move on. So, I mean, looking ahead, Johnny.
One quick thing. I think one thing that is maybe holding back Oklahoma with the defensive line is who we're putting out there to play. A&M, if you look at who's playing for them, and something that we talked about with last year's class and heading into this recruiting cycle was, how are they going to fit more defensive linemen in their rotation? They took, too deep essentially last year in the 22 class, and it's not like they didn't have talented linemen already at A&M, but they're somehow rotating their young players in. And at the end of the day, unless you're going to Alabama, like objectively, unless you're going to Alabama, there's no reason to go to a school that's going to sit you for a year. I think Oklahoma and the staff maybe needs to consider that, maybe be more open to the idea of playing their younger players that even I think the staff recognizes they are more naturally talented. For example, Jaron Kanik. Venables has admitted he is probably raw and doesn't know the playbook quite yet, isn't ready between the ears, but he is one of the most naturally talented linebackers in that room. He's just not getting the opportunity because of his preparation. And that's fine. I'm not saying that's wrong, but it is going to be something that the players look at. Why would I go sit for a year when I can go to a different school that will give me an opportunity to play as a freshman?
And that's a I mean that's a fair point. It is appealing for a kid coming out of high school to be like, oh, I can go play day one. And the perception was, from us, is David Hicks is far and away would be the most, I guess, raw talented kid, and that he'd be good enough to play the defensive line. Maybe Venables and Bates were giving him a little bit of a different impression. Like, granted, I mean, we weren't on those phone calls, we weren't in the meetings, but obviously they must have been giving him a good impression for him to be silently committed. So, but A&M can be like, look what we're doing with all these 5 stars. There's room for you here. We're rotating Overton, we're rotating Stewart in, we're rotating Walter Nolan in. We're getting them all to play. And Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy has been out and hurt, and so he's not in the rotation. But then there's another couple guys that they got as well that they're rotating so far. So I don't know. I think at the end of the day, it's not like A&M has been elite in producing a ton of interior defensive tackles into the NFL. So it can't be really said for that. I do agree. I think proximity and being close to family really played a factor in this, and maybe a few other factors that we just don't know. And we probably will never know. So, I mean, everyone can speculate. I'm just going to leave it at that. So where OU goes from here? I mean, so OU had Johnny Bowens on campus this past weekend. Johnny Bowens is a teammate of Sooner commit Anthony Evans. He's a 2023 4-star defensive lineman. He was once committed to A&M and has since decommitted. I know he's still looking at A&M, but I would think that Johnny Bowens immediately goes to the #1 target. Because they obviously also, everyone seems to have forgotten about Jordan Bernard, because he's not quite as highly rated as what David Hicks was or is. And so we lost out on the last 2 defensive linemen that we kind of thought for a while were kind of in the
They
bag for Oklahoma.
they were both locks coming out of Party at the Palace.
Yeah.
Just down the stretch,
Yeah.
something changed.
So some things changed. And at the end of the day, we got to keep in perspective also. And people are going to be like, well, Oklahoma can't close. Oklahoma can't close. Well, Anthony Evans, the morning of his announcement, was going to go to Georgia, and OU flipped him. And Colton Vasek was all but going to Texas, and then came out of the blue after the Party at the Palace and committed to the Sooners. So this staff can close. There's no question, and it will happen. It's just we have to be patient. So I look at Johnny Bowens being a guy. Could they, Caden McDonald, he's another 4-star from Georgia. I think he's got an official set up for the Kansas game, the KU game. And then could they potentially get Marcus Deal to commit to them as a defensive lineman? Maybe, probably not. It seems like that Johnny Bowens is the most likely candidate, because Caden McDonald might not want to end up leaving the Southeast and be closer to home. So if there was one guy I would expect the OU to be in the running for, and at least very well a likely commit, potentially like a very likely potential commit, would be Johnny Bowens. And you pair him up with LeBlanc and them, and then you look at the linebackers. Tassili Akana still floating out there, still's got his official setup. Peyton Bowen. My confidence after what happened with A&M with Peyton Bowen makes me wonder. I'm not saying that they're correlated or anything. It's just, it's been happening so much to OU with A&M, going against A&M. It's tough to get really confident against.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I just don't think that their recruitments really have anything in common, other than the fact that A&M and Oklahoma seem to be the leaders in their recruitment. At this point, right? If I still think Oklahoma has a shot at Bowen because of the relationships that Bowen has with people at Oklahoma. His girlfriend is playing soccer there next year. One of his best friends is the Oklahoma quarterback commit. He knows the coaches much closer to Norman than he is to College Station. A lot of things are playing in Oklahoma's favor with Peyton Bowen. It really is just a longer process. He's really taking it all in before he makes any solid decision because he is visiting Notre Dame early November when they play Clemson with his brother. So I think this recruitment is still there's still some time to go. Probably won't have a decision on if he's flipping. Probably not till December during that early national signing day would be my expectation. Tassili Akana, you mentioned him. Definitely still think that guy is very much in Oklahoma's radar. Someone that I think should be considered and brought back. And if you guys watched the OU Insider stream, they kind of talked about it a little bit. Is Malachi Coleman? Oklahoma kind of stopped recruiting him recently, and because of the tight end situation, more than likely want a little bit more experience there after this year. I think that they are kind of pigeonholing him right into the tight end slot, and he's athletic enough that maybe you can shift him over to the defense. Maybe play defensive end, edge, outside linebacker kind of situation. He does play that in high school. He's good at it. He's like talented enough. Like that guy's got these physical tools that Isaiah Simmons has and had in college. He hasn't really turned out to be what was expected of him at the pros, but college level, he's got that athleticism that you would want out of that kind of player. I mean, definitely something that I'd like to see happen. Again, it's tough to know exactly what's happening because it's not like the coaches are going to come out and tell, everyone and, here's what we're doing. But we can kind of get a sense of where Oklahoma's going. And like you said, I think Johnny Bowens has jumped towards the top of Oklahoma's priority list especially for the defensive line. Offense and defensive line has been something that the staff has really been going after in this class, and I think it's going to be the same in the 24 class. We just got to see, where the next guy is. I think it's going to be a while before Oklahoma gets another commit, given that it's the football season, high school football is happening. Kids are focused on that as well. But come December, I think we're going to see a lot of things start going Oklahoma's way again. Yates, still a guy that's very likely to flip. Bowen, we just talked about him. Peyton Bowen, Johnny Bowens, too many Bowens. And I was actually thinking about this. Peyton Bowen, very similar situation to Billy Bowman coming out of high school. Both were committed elsewhere. Oklahoma was pushing. Both had girlfriends that were committed to play a sport at Oklahoma with friends at Oklahoma. Like, very similar. I think Billy Bowman reaching out to him and trying to create that friendship is going to be something that'll be important for him to make a decision to flip to OU.
That's actually a really good analogy. I kind of forgot about, or comparison, not analogy, but comparison to Billy Bowman, because you're right, because Jada Coleman was committed to play softball. And yeah, I would like to think that OU is going to be able to close out on Peyton Bowen. But even if they don't, and there's other targets out there, they're going to be able to pick up a few solid safeties. They're going to be fine. I do agree with you on Malachi Coleman. I feel like it's a little odd that it's fine if you're dead set on him being a tight end, but when you look around in that tight end room, there could be a few guys like Jason Llewellyn might not end up being a tight end. He might transition to, an offensive lineman or something like that. If you transition one of those guys over there, and then you can still go to the portal and you get a guy like Malachi Coleman, but you get and put him at the tight end spot, he might just be better as a wide receiver. You just never know with that guy. And I mean, he's 6'5", 205. He's a freakish athlete. I just don't feel like OU is in a position to turn away a guy like that with that high of a potential ceiling. And I know he's very raw. I would like to see OU jump back into it. Maybe there's more to it than we know. I mean, obviously we're just on the outside looking in, but I would like to think that a guy like Malachi Coleman is a take no matter what. And I know obviously there's something holding them back. And I know they want to go to the transfer portal and get an experienced tight end, and I get that. Looking along the defensive line, if OU can't get Johnny Bowens or Caden McDonald, they very well might be looking at the transfer portal. And you never know who could be going to the transfer portal. I mean, we've talked about, can Texas A&M hold on to all those 5 stars? Could a Gabriel Brownlow Dindy be like, wait a minute, I made a mistake. I'm not playing here once he's back from injury. OU wants, I could go play back at OU, maybe. Not just him specifically, but there could be some very high-end 4-star, 5-star prospects from the 22 and 21 classes that hit the portal because they're not playing or one reason or another. And OU might be able to fill the roster out that way. So it's not all doom and gloom at the end of the day. So I see OU, they might kick the tires on some current commits elsewhere. There might be some 4- and 5-star defensive linemen that are committed to some schools, and they're going to start knocking on their doors, and someone might be interested. That wasn't, say 6 months ago. So it's interesting to see, but I think OU is going to finish top 5. And if you would have told me top 5 with this much defensive talent already committed, I would have been happy. And I think most people would be happy if the way that this went wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, I really wish that Oklahoma would have pursued Peter Woods more. Like obviously everything, 2020, but hindsight's 2020. But I really think that would have been a good guy to go after. He was clearly interested in still playing for Todd Bates. That's the only reason he wanted to go to OU, which is I'm okay with it. He's a very talented interior defensive lineman. Not sure why there wasn't more interest reciprocated there by the staff. I guess that's a story for another day, though.
And another guy I wish OU would have went after and didn't string him along was Edric Hill.
Yeah, interior defensive line. I think they were just so focused on David Hicks. Again, David Hicks was a silent commit for 2 months that they were like, all right, we got to start focusing at other positions to fill out the rest of this class. And the Hicks blind sucker punch is kind of kicking the staff in the nuts here because they did miss out on 2 very big prospects that they could have pursued outside of Hicks.
They did. And, Edric Hill's a tough loss. And but at the end of the day, hindsight's always 2020, and it's hard to blame the staff when a kid tells you he's committed to you, you take his word for it until he proves you otherwise. And it just so happened that he proved otherwise pretty much at the last second. And this has happened now with Gabriel Brownlow Dindy, Levius Overton or Lebeus Overton, and now David Hicks, all the Texas A&M. And could down the road, if Texas A&M goes 8-4 and OU gets hot and plays well, could OU kick the tires again? Maybe, and maybe he's interested. I don't know, but part of me thinks the staff is not going to really try to pursue him anymore after the way that this went down. Like it's kind of a principle type deal. If you wanted to commit somewhere else, you could have handled it a little bit differently and given a heads up a while ago, or maybe truly he decided the last second. But I have a hard time believing that kids can flip. And even Anthony Evans, I have a hard time wrapping my mind around that. You're so torn that one last conversation could convince you to commit to one school and not the other. Like it's the trajectory of your life, and it's a 4-year decision. I just feel like you kind of have your heart. It's your heart and your brain that are going back and forth. Your heart might say OU, or your heart might say A&M, but your brain's telling you OU. Well, you always go with your heart at the end of the day. Anthony Evans wanted to be a Sooner, but he might have saw that there was a better potential at Georgia because they're a little more thin at the wide receiver position, but his heart won out in the end. I just feel like David Hicks' heart was in South Texas and wanted to be closer to his family, but his brain was telling him Oklahoma.
I mean, very likely. I think that's a good way of putting it. Sometimes it's just which one the passion or logic wins out. Sometimes for some players it's logic, for some it's the passion. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in recruiting for this class. But I mean, this recruiting class, this cycle is pretty much, it's coming to an end. Not over yet, but really 2 more months, really. because you
Yeah.
don't see too much happening in January and February. I mean, definitely things still happening, but not a lot, especially with how full this class already is. I wouldn't expect the staff to be focusing on 23 by January and February.
Yeah, and most of these kids have already pulled the trigger, signed on the dotted line, enrolled early. Anymore now, it's the trend to enroll early because you want the 6 months of being on campus early, and it gets
Mhm.
you a step ahead and a chance to play as a true freshman, or at least a better chance to play when you're matching up against sophomores and redshirt seniors. So um, yeah, it's almost over, and it sucks what happened, but OU is going to be fine. The world's not ending. Oklahoma is Oklahoma, and we will be landing five-star defensive linemen in the 2024 class. Just be patient. It's going to be okay.
And
Relax.
I was telling you this before we started recording, and I've never really understood it, but I know the fan base as a whole is really wanting to play USC, and I get why. Personally, I don't give a shit about playing them. If we play them, it'll be cool, and hopefully we beat them, just like I feel about every other opponent. But after this week and what's happened with the defensive line recruiting over the year, with losing three guys to A&M, I'm much more excited about playing A&M and wanting to beat them that much more, because it does feel like, and in recruiting, it just feels like when you don't get picked, especially with these situations, it's a rejection, and it's just not that great of a feeling, if it makes sense. Especially with how David Hicks went down, I just want to beat them so bad that it shows some of these recruits like maybe Oklahoma was the better option in the long run, but they ended up picking A&M.
Yeah, and we'll see what ends up happening. I kind of get the feeling that the first year that OU is in the SEC, I think the SEC schedulers are, and the scheduling is going to make sure that there's a matchup of OU and A&M, and that will be a good introduction into the SEC for
Yeah,
OU. So
that game's gonna be so fun in Norman.
yeah, Norman going on the road at Kyle Field, it'll be a good time. So well, let us know what you think. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of comments. A lot of people are going to be commenting as we've gone through this video. I'm curious to see what people have to say, but we can turn the page and OU, it's going to be totally fine. Relax, as Aaron Rodgers once said and spelled it out. Just relax. All right, so we'll move on to the betting. Just an update on the standings, like on the year. I'm 16-15, and Jose, you are
18-15.
18 and 15. So he's got a couple more wins than I do. I've got a total of actually 5 picks. So you've got 8. So I'll let you start.
All right. Do you want me to do 3 and then kick it over to you and we'll start
Yeah.
alternating?
Yeah.
All
Let's
right.
do that.
So I'll start with OU versus at TCU. This one was actually tough, but I know that we said we were going to pick the Oklahoma game every week. Because it's 6.5, I took Oklahoma. I think we can win by a touchdown. If you guys are joining us or also betting, if you find that number at 7.5, I would take TCU. It just makes sense. I think if you get that 7 plus the hook, it's a good deal there. But at 6.5, I think Oklahoma's choice. Next game, Alabama. I believe they're traveling to Arkansas. Alabama's, while it is at Arkansas, and we did see Alabama struggle in a true road game at Texas, I think Nick Saban is going to really be on his guys this year. Make sure they're prepared for the crowd noise. Make sure that they're ready. Make sure they're mentally focused on the task at hand. I have Alabama covering 17 points. I just don't believe in the Arkansas defense can do enough to stop Bryce Young and those wide receivers at Alabama. And then the next game that I'll talk about is Rutgers, I believe, versus Ohio State. Ohio State is a 39.5 point favorite. Rutgers, and I been very confident that they will lose. I don't think that they'll lose by 40 points. I think they keep it close enough to cover.
All right. Well, my first game is going to be the OU TCU game. I'm taking OU minus 6.5. I think OU wins. I can't quite remember what my score prediction was. I think it was 42-27, I want to say. I think OU wins by a couple touchdowns. Um, I think it's tight and close in the beginning, but I think OU can pull away towards the end, and I think this team will be very motivated.
All right. My next one is Washington minus 2.5. Honestly, I don't remember who they're playing. I think it's Oregon State, actually. Uh, don't quote me on that.
Oregon State's playing Utah.
Okay, I also have Utah, so maybe that's why I forgot. So not sure who Washington is playing, to be completely honest. But I remember when I was going through the slate, thinking I believe in Michael Penix Jr. and I think he can get them to win by at least a field goal. So I've got Washington there.
Okay. Michigan, Iowa. Iowa can't score the football. I know it's at Iowa. Um, I'm taking Michigan minus 10.5. I just don't think Iowa can score the points. But weird things happen in Iowa City. So I don't know. I could see it going either way, but I think Michigan rolls in and scores too much.
So Washington's playing UCLA. Just to clarify that, I'm on the opposite side of that game. I think it. I have Iowa plus 10.5. And as usual, the under, even though I don't feel great about this week's under because Michigan can put up some points. I think Iowa's defense is going to make JJ McCarthy's life absolute hell. That defense is very good. And McCarthy, well, he did look very good his two non-conference games that he got to start in. He did struggle a little bit against Maryland, and Maryland's defense is nowhere near as good as Iowa's. So I think that they can at least cover and hopefully keep it pretty close where they're going under here. 41.5 is the total points.
All right. Kentucky, Ole Miss. I am taking Kentucky plus 7 points. I think Ole Miss almost lost to Tulsa last week. I think they won by 7 or 8 points. I think Kentucky's a solid team. They play good defense. A whole touchdown's a lot to beat a team by. They're going to have to beat them by 8+. And I just think that Kentucky might not win this game, but if they don't win, they would only lose by like 3 or 4 points. I think it's a tight game all the way through, and I could very well see Kentucky ended up winning this game.
Yeah. My next one is Oklahoma State money line. They are playing Baylor. They're coming off a bye week, rested. They've been able to prepare for Baylor for 2 weeks now. Not really sure why they're the dogs in this battle, but I'll take the money line. I got them at plus 14, 114.
Okay. Oregon State, Utah. I'm taking Utah minus 10.5 points. I think Oregon State's they're coming off a close loss to USC. I think it's going to be a letdown for them. Utah's a solid team. I think they're going to be able to move the ball. And I think Utah pulls away late.
My next one. So I guess I don't have Utah, but I did look at that game. But my next one is Kansas money line. Again, I have that at plus 126. I'm just going to ride with Kansas. I think they're good enough offensively to make any team's day tough. I think the points were pretty low, so I wanted to take the money line there. Better value.
Yep. And my last pick is East Carolina versus South Florida. I'm taking East Carolina minus 9. Earlier in the season, I took East Carolina plus the points against NC State, and they very well should have beaten NC State. East Carolina is a pretty darn good team, and I just don't think South Florida is going to be able to keep up with them scoring wise.
I've gone through all my picks. So if you have another one.
Nope, that is it. So you had 8, I have 5. We'll see how this weekend goes. That's all I've got. Do you have any final thoughts, or do you want to roll into the individual challenge?
No more thoughts. Usual Friday in the video challenge, a lock of the week or locks of the week. And if you don't like participating in that, let us know who you think Oklahoma needs to pursue at the defensive line position, and your thoughts on the whole recruitment of Hicks and what Oklahoma is going to do moving forward.
Definitely. So be sure to do the end of video challenge. Let us know what you think, your locks of the week. If you made it this far, hit the subscribe button, turn the notification bell on, like the video, and obviously do the end of video challenge. And follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and and Apple and Spotify. And everything's linked in the description below. And we will catch you guys next time. And OU hopefully ends up winning out.